Afternoon, friends. Today's devotional reading comes from the Reverend Jaco Bester, who is colleague minister at St. Columba's Presbyterian Church in Parkview in Gauteng. And we are back today onto our readings of Acts 27 and 28. So Monday the 25th of May 2020, Acts 27 verses 27 to 32. On the 14th night, we were still being driven across the Adriatic Sea, when about midnight the sailors sensed that they were approaching land. They took soundings and found that the water was 120 feet deep. A short time later they took soundings again and found that it was 90 feet deep. Fearing that we would be dashed against the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for daylight. In an attempt to escape from the ship, the sailors let the lifeboat down into the sea, pretending they were going to lower some anchors from the bow. Then Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, "Unless these men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved." So the soldiers cut the ropes that held the lifeboat and let it drift away. Amen. Jaco reflects, in the past few months of dealing with the COVID-19 crisis, we've been reminded time and again by leaders, activists, and social commentators that we are all in the same boat. It's a lovely phrase that engenders a sense of solidarity and reminds us that the only way to beat this virus is together. It calls to mind our interdependence during times of crisis and complements a social conscience that is rooted in a culture of Ubuntu. So especially in South Africa, these words have rung true. The problem is that this is a pretty big boat. While we're all on it together, some have better cabins than others. We may well be on the same boat, but the view is dramatically different from one deck to another. The temptation will always be to look out for ourselves as the ship makes its way through this terrible storm. This is our default setting after all. This is a temptation that must be confronted and overcome by God's grace if we truly are to come through this crisis together. In Acts 27 to 32, we read a portion of the story that recounts Paul's final journey to Rome. Imagine the drama of this scene, the storm raging mercilessly and the waves beating violently against a helpless vessel, being thrown about in the wind like little more than the paper boats we used to sail in gutters as children. Paul and his companions, the centurion and the soldiers, the captain and the sailors, all in the same boat, but their experience would have been very different from one another. Paul seems to have an almost angelic inner peace and a sense of security that allows him the clarity of mind to make decisions and offer advice. The centurion is so bewildered and overwhelmed that he follows the instructions of his prisoner. The sailors and their captain have seen storms like this before, and they're so sure the ship will sink that they cunningly make a plan to lower the lifeboat and make a stealthy escape. The great tragedy of this story is that the only ones who had any hope of seeing the others through the storm were the very ones who tried to jump ship and save themselves. The sailors were the ones with the knowledge needed to make good decisions. They had the experience to measure the storm and see a way through. They had the skills to keep the ship afloat if it was going to be saved at all. But their desire for self-preservation clouded their judgment. They were all in the same boat, facing the same storm, but the opportunity and competence for making it through was dramatically different. And the sailors would have made the devastating choice for self-preservation if their plan had not been spotted by Paul. In the next few weeks and months, we will continually be reminded that we are all in the same boat. And the only way to overcome this tragic crisis is to do it together. There will always be the temptation to jump ship, to look after ourselves, and those who, like us, are lucky enough to have the resources to make it to safety. But the gospel calls us to give expression to our faith in Jesus, and therefore we will need to stick with the ship and offer all we have for the safety of others. Will this be risky? Yes. It will be as scary as being in a dinghy drifting towards a raging storm. Will it be costly? Yes. It will require us to chuck most of our cargo into the sea, but it is the only way to make it through and stay true to the faith that we hold dear. Come, let's pray together. O God, our generous provider, whenever we think of those who become victims to tragic existence, to poverty and grief, to loss and violence, we wonder why we have it so easy. We wonder why you have been so kind to us. Then we remember the covenant promises you made to our father Abraham. He was blessed so that he could be a blessing to others. We ask to be such a blessing too. Teach us generosity so that we can be like you, giving everything for the ones you love. Amen. God bless you, my friends.